So in the 60s, people start showing up from Israel, Goitin.
And Goitin in particular. And at that point, so the library appoints a new librarian specifically to look after the collection, which is Dr. Knopf, or Knopf, K-N-O-P-F. I think he went off to become the librarian at Bar-Ilan.
Okay.
And he starts a process of, restarts the whole process that's been dormant for 50 years of conserving and cataloguing the collection. So he starts the process of cataloguing the Bible manuscripts, which eventually become the catalogue by Malcolm Davis.
Not just Davis.
Davis and Althwaite, many years later.
You were part of that. Okay.
Yeah.
That's why I first heard your name. When I met you the first time, I'm like, wait, this guy's from the catalog.
That's right. Yeah, my magnum opus.
Is he real in the flesh? No, I really thought you were this legendary figure because you're Davis and Althwaite.
No, I came much later. Davis had already done all the work, and I just sort of polished it for publication. Yeah. And so Dr. Knopf started that off, and then after a while, he left to go off, and they decided to appoint someone to a new person to replace him. And so that's when Stefan Reif arrived. Stefan Reif was appointed. And Stefan, sort of gauging the whole scale of the task, decided you couldn't just do this, the way that you would do any library collection. Because, libraries are full of uncatalogued, unconserved collections, because we keep things for posterity. So there's always the idea, well, you bring them into the library and we'll worry about them later, which is why things sit on our shelves for centuries, not being read or catalogued.
I've been to library archives where they bring out a box.
Yeah.
And what's in that box? Nobody knows. You got to go through and see.
Because it's easy to acquire collections. It's very difficult to get money for cataloguing. And although you'd think cataloguing was a core activity of the library, all of our efforts are cataloguing the new books that come in and not the sort of ancient collections that we have hanging around. Anyway, so Stefan decided that what it needed was to create a research centre to actually drum up interest in the collection and start fundraising for it. So he did that. In 1974, he created the Geniza Research Unit.
Which is where we're sitting right now.
Which is where we're now, and I'm now the head of.
Okay.
And he did deals with, so the Chief Rabbi of England, who then was, had fundraising dinners. Stefan was very good at schmoozing the wider Jewish community in England. And he was able to fund the complete conservation, and Israel as well. So Israel got copies of microfilm of all of our material for the Institute of Microfilmed Hebrew Manuscripts, which is why the Geniza has been available since the 1970s or 80s in the Institute of Microfilmed Hebrew Manuscripts. And so he did all that. Within about 10 years, he'd conserved the whole collection and begun the process of, these catalogue volumes that we produced.
And when you microfilm something, you're basically photographing it. Then it has a shelf mark. Was that kind of part of the idea, or did it already have a shelf mark?
No, some shelf marks were added at that stage because we've. So Goitin himself helped with the. So that's why the collection. If you use the collection today, we talk about the old series, the new series, and the additional series.
So explain that. I've never understood that fully.
So the old series comprises lots of different sections. So there's the Arabic, there's the miscellaneous, there's various, the TS A, B, C, D, all that. The old series is what was originally sorted and conserved in the days of Warman, essentially. Yeah.
Okay.
Bit of overlap beyond, but that's it. So that was the stuff that was conserved and identified early on. The new series was the stuff that was conserved after Goitin had come and said, this stuff is important. And he helped categorize some of that. When his sort of fingerprints are all over the collection, sort of literally and metaphorically, because he put great store by the documentary corpus, so not just the literary text. He wasn't interested in the Bible, but he put great store by all these tattered remnants of Jewish trade of India and these amazing things that we have from the 12th and 13th.
And he really was an historian of what I know of his work is mostly about merchant activity, right?
Yeah.
That's what I know of it. So he really was almost like an economic historian.
He began life as a sort of linguist, folklorist. The first volume of, and then he was an economic historian by the time he started working on his, he wrote his 5 volumes, A Mediterranean Society.
Right, that's the one I know.
The first volume is called Economic Foundations. At that point, he was still an economic historian. He's interested, they didn't have spreadsheets in those days, but he would have been interested in spreadsheets.
They were just physical.
Yeah,
right?
He probably had a slide rule.
Yeah.
But anyway, so in that book are chapters on the size and type of baskets used to ship stuff across the Mediterranean, right? Yeah, if you want to know how big the baskets were on a boat laden with, the stuff of India going to the to the markets of Southern Europe, then it's in that book, right? And he can give you the wages of workers and the value of the dinar and the price of bread and all that kind of stuff. But he got seduced by the intimacy of the Geniza, because you're not just reading these texts. So Ibn Yiju, writing from India, famous India trader, he'll be telling you about the price of spices and bronze. But at the same time, you will also learn that he got married to a local girl in India. Pretty tricky if you're Jewish and you want to marry a Jew in India. There aren't so many. Yeah. So in his case, what did he do? He bought a slave. Okay. He freed her. Therefore, she becomes Jewish, and he married her.
I see.
In later life, when he decided to move back to Egypt, settled in Yemen, they said that he had actually broken the law because he had actually had sex with her before he had freed her. And therefore...
And was that illegal?
That invalidated the marriage. You're not allowed to do that. And so he had to get a rabbinic ruling. So he applied to the academy that was then in... he applied to the leadership in Yemen for a ruling. And this was a leadership that he had donated extensively to. And they ruled in his favour.
That's shocking.
And supposedly misquoting the Mishnah in doing so. Yeah.
Yeah. It helps to be a donor, I suppose.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, so in the course of reading these spare economic documents, he is also learning a lot about the lives of everyday people, and so his next volume is more about the family and social life, and they go on until his final volume is called, I can't remember what it's actually called now, the fifth volume, but anyway, he ends up with a chapter on the Mediterranean mind. And he starts talking, about these people who were products of the Mediterranean. They were neither Jew nor Muslim. They didn't see themselves in such simple terms. They were inhabitants of this great land under the Mediterranean sun. And he really got seduced by the intimacy that comes from reading documents that were not intended for posterity. That letters were only ever intended to be read by one or two people, or perhaps to be read out in the synagogue. Yeah. But not more than that. And yet here you are 1,000 years later, and you're reading about, why won't you come home? Your daughter is pregnant, and everyone's saying, where's her father?
Wow. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And so
anyway, glimpse into everyday life. That's really cool.
So Goitein helped create the new series. And at that point, there was kind of a feeling, that's it, we're done. There were lots of little bits left over, but they're too little to be any use. But by the time Stefan got here, finished up the new series, he decided that we might as well do the lot. So that's then the additional series. And these are all the tiny bits that Goitein thought were too small to be useful. And that became the additional series, which is actually the largest part of the collection.
And from my perspective of what I do, some of the most important, like some of the fragments that we're working on, I'm here to be working on manuscripts and fragments. A lot of them are from the AS, the additional series. Yeah. And that includes fragments of a Torah scroll that was carbon-14 tested to the 6th or 7th century.
Yeah, and similarly, all the Palestinian Nikud fragments of Bible, most of those are from the new series, from the additional series, sorry. And so
they're tiny bits.
Yeah, because they're old. They're old and they haven't been well treated. Wow. And they possibly were in several different Genizas or libraries before they got to Egypt. I mean, that's, So that's why the collection is divided into these series. And so Stefan created the Geniza Research Unit in 1974, and he managed to get this great achievement done of getting everything made available. Now, he retired in 2006, and that's when I took over.